3 Super Bowls. A tradition. A legacy. However, a man would arise who would damn the course of their franchise's history, leaving it marred in controversy and scandal.
Put it all together. Is Dan Snyder the worst owner in the history of the National Football League?
Does this prove that Daniel Snyder is the worst owner in football?
There is breaking news just coming in about Washington's NFL team. 15 former female employees are speaking to the Washington Post, detailing allegations of sexual harassment over a span of 13 years.
The Washington Post is reporting the team paid $1.6 million to battle a sexual misconduct claim. This is against owner Dan Snyder.
A secret $55 million loan has become a primary focus of federal investigators. The partners investigated the team's finances and claimed Snyder had used the team as his personal piggy bank.
Some of the cheerleaders are making disturbing allegations about what they say was going on behind the scenes.
Snyder added, "I'm going to find out something about him." Snyder has bragged to associates that he's collected dirt on Goodell and team owners to stave off any attempts at forcing him to sell his team.
So the Redskins is the talk of the town.
The National Football League may be getting more comfortable with the names Milstein and Snyder. The NFL's Finance Committee meets in Miami later this week to discuss the sale of the Redskins franchise. The Washington Post reports the 8-member committee is now leaning toward accepting the Milstein-Snyder bid.
At just 34 years old, Daniel Snyder purchased the Washington Redskins for a record $800 million. Becoming the most expensive transaction in the history of sports. Filled with entrepreneurial spirit, the 20-year-old Daniel Snyder decided to drop out of college and start his own business. Snyder leased jets, flying college kids to beaches for spring break. Earning more than $1 million, running the entire business out of his parents' bedroom. Snyder's second venture would be a magazine titled Campus USA, aimed at college crowds, and it quickly took off. The business rapidly expanding and in need of capital, Snyder looked to real estate mogul Mort Zuckerman, receiving a $3 million investment. But in just 2 years, Campus USA would shut down.
Mr. Green, want my Coke?
You're America's favorite, #1.
Where else could you have so much fun?
Snyder's big break would come with his advertising company, Snyders Communications. And almost as soon as the company launched, it became a roaring success. And in 1996, Snyder became the youngest CEO of a New York Stock Exchange listed company at the age of 32. By 1998, the company had over 12,000 employees and over $1 billion in revenue. And in 2000, Snyder would sell the company for over $2 billion.
At age 34, became the youngest franchise owner in NFL history.
Now, Snyder stood at the helm of one of the NFL's most coveted and iconic franchises.
Set to get underway as the Washington Redskins take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
In Snyder's first season with the Redskins, it showed tremendous promise. The Redskins had defeated the Detroit Lions handily in the wild card round. winning 27-13. Now, the entire season rested on one play, and disaster would strike.
Bad snap. Bad snap.
A bad omen
Oh, snap.
of a tumultuous future.
Today in Washington, D.C., a congressional roundtable met to examine the toxic workplace culture surrounding the Washington Commanders and owner Dan Snyder.
Snyder's aggressiveness in business had served him well, and he had no intention of slowing down, signing future Hall of Famers Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith, as well as quarterback Jeff George on a 7-year, $56 million deal. Big names had made the Redskins favorites among some for the Super Bowl. The moves, however, would soon backfire.
Field. After Jeff George.
Head coach Norv Turner was fired after week 14, launching a coaching carousel that would last for the entirety of Dan Snyder's tenure.
Do you think you could be fired?
Pardon me?
Do you think you could be fired this week?
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy that question.
Sanders would retire, and the team would miss the playoffs. Marty Schottenheimer, hired to replace Norv Turner, would last just one season. With his most notable achievement being the firing of the director of player personnel, Vinny Serrato, a favorite of Snyder's, and would be deemed by many to be nothing but Snyder's lapdog. Legendary college coach Steve Spurrier was signed to a 5-year, $25 million deal. Spurrier would resign after 2 losing seasons with the team. Snyder's time as the Redskins owner had been turbulent. Big moves met with bigger failures. The constant search for perfection had been met with mediocrity. But the most shocking events would not occur on the gridiron, but behind closed doors. A charity event was held, raising money for children's charities, hosting some of the wealthiest men in the region. It was a fight night, a night where able-bodied fighters compete for supremacy, and Redskins cheerleaders performed. Snyder was in attendance, and one cheerleader in particular caught his attention: Tiffany Skirby. As she mingled with guests after their performance on stage, Snyder called her over. They had never spoken before. Tiffany walked over and engaged in a brief and awkward conversation before Snyder told her that Anthony Roberts was here, one of Snyder's close friends, and a doctor who had performed LASIK eye surgery on Tiffany. Then Snyder abruptly turned the direction of the conversation, stating, "We have a hotel room. Why don't you and Tony go upstairs and get to know each other better?" Stunned, Tiffany tried to laugh it off, but Snyder was not. Realizing this, Tiffany stated, "Oh, I'm working. Have a great time." A dark reputation was developing behind closed doors.
We begin today with news out of Washington.
Further damaging accusations of harassment.
What's the limit? What's the line?
The head coach and team president of the Washington Redskins, Joe Gibbs.
Joe Gibbs was back. The Redskins' legendary head coach, who had led the team to 3 Super Bowl victories, had returned. And Snyder hoped so would the glory days of the Redskin franchise.
Back in a jammed-packed Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida for the Redskins and the Bucs.
After ending the season 6-10 in 2004, they made it back to the playoffs. The game was close-fought, with the Redskins sealing the victory.
The best offense, Seahawks.
You talk about that 6-game winning streak, besides
matching Snyder's best showing as owner of the Redskins. However, the Redskins would once again fail to make it past the divisional round. Their wild card win would mark the beginning of a winless 17-year playoff drought. But this drought would not be without its fair share of controversy. In 2005, Snyder announced that to purchase season tickets, the only credit card the team would take would be the Redskins' Extra Point MasterCard, immediately drawing a whirlwind of criticism from fans and critics. Snyder changed his decision just 2 days later. In 2006, Snyder increased the lower bowl general admission tickets by 39%. In the same year, Snyder drew criticism for selling commemorative 9/11 caps, with no mention of the profits going to foundations. Snyder also drew criticism for selling 8 to 12-month-old peanuts to fans, which they claimed was an inventory mistake.
And the Redskins, the hot team, they come into today's game having won 4 in a row. The Redskins and the Seahawks, and you can bet the 12th man will be very much in evidence at Quest Field today.
Washington would make it back to the playoffs in a hard-fought bout with the Hasselbeck-led Seattle Seahawks. The Redskins, however, could not hang on. This would mark Joe Gibbs' final game in the NFL.
Welcome to Beauties on the Beach. I'm Chelsea, your host, taking you inside of the making of the Redskins cheerleader swimsuit calendar.
Hi, my name's Barbara. I'm 26 years old. Hi, my name is Buffy. I'm 26 years old.
Hi, my name's Tiffany. I'm 30 years old, and this is my 7th year with the Washington Redskins cheerleaders.
The video Beauties on the Beach chronicled the making of the Redskins swimsuit calendar. In the video, we see Redskin cheerleaders posing and talking to the camera about their experience on the shoot. Little did they know that some of the footage captured would be for private use only. A video was asked to be created, featuring certain moments from the video that were not intended to be shown to the public, containing moments such as them accidentally exposing themselves while changing posing positions. The video would be titled The Good Bits and would be created for none other than Dan Snyder. Years would pass until any of this would come to light. Snyder brought former QB and quarterback coach Jim Zorn to replace Joe Gibbs. However, The signing would be overshadowed by a particular development.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
We're down over 16%.
Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%. The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
The signs were everywhere, but now it's official. We are in a recession.
I think this is the most significant financial crisis in the post-war period.
There are fears the sell-off will continue on Wall Street.
Soaring gas prices, falling home prices, and rising unemployment.
The recession had hit the U.S. Many lost their jobs, their homes, their financial security, and accordingly, many luxuries were sacrificed that one could otherwise afford. However, billionaire Daniel Snyder was not so understanding, suing 125 season ticket holders for $3.6 million for attempting to be released from their contracts as they were unable to keep up with the payments during the recession. Among the season ticket holders was 72-year-old grandmother Pat Hill. And after Snyder won a judgment of $2 million, Pat Hill declared bankruptcy. In Zorn's first year with the Redskins, he showed promise. Combining the West Coast offense with the Redskins' power running scheme proved highly effective. Zorn started the season 6-2, but ended the season going 2-6, ending with an 8-8 record. The Redskins were on the brink of playoff contention, and Snyder decided to add what he believed was the missing piece.
This is the Albert Haynesworth you see on TV.
That could be the defensive MVP this year. You can't stop these guys.
Albert Haynesworth, and then from the outside.
A hard-hitting defensive tackle who takes no prisoners on the football field.
The Skins are banking on the hope that they'll get what they paid for in defensive tackle Albert Haynesworth.
The biggest name new to Redskin camp also has the biggest contract. Albert Haynesworth signed the $100 million deal in February.
Snyder had signed Albert Haynesworth for a record-breaking $100 million. The two-time All-Pro had wreaked havoc during his days in Tennessee, and Snyder was excited to see what he could bring to the Redskins.
But they were last in the NFC in sacks and takeaways, looking for more dynamic plays out of that defense.
Well, and they should be able to get it. I mean, they paid $100 million for defensive tackle Albert Haynesworth, and he's going to garner a lot of the attention in the middle.
The 2009 season for the Washington Redskins would be an utter disaster.
You're saying who?
And the Redskins' $100 million man had proved to be a colossal bust, constantly butting heads with the coaching staff and plagued with off-the-field issues.
Has worked out a plea deal in a reckless driving case. Haynesworth
but nothing was as unforgivable as his on-the-field effort.
When you go back and watch Albert Haynesworth on that,
I was just going to say it.
You got to get up off the ground and stay alive and chase this guy.
Yep.
And
during the season, fans began to turn on Snyder and began bringing signs to games, criticizing the owner and his staff, causing Snyder to ban signs from all games. The Redskins would finish the season 4-12.
When we return, more on the fallout from Christmas Day. Albert Haynesworth was dismissed from practice. The season on the field has been a complete disaster, and now things continue to fall apart off of them as well.
After the 2009 season, he refused to participate in off-season workouts. He arrived at camp in poor physical condition, unable to pass a basic fitness test. By week 13 of the regular season, he would be suspended by the team for failing to show up to practice.
And the Redskins traded Albert Haynesworth to the New England Patriots.
He would soon be traded to the New England Patriots for a 5th-round pick. making him what many consider to be the biggest free agent bust in NFL history.
And we begin with breaking news out of Redskins Park, where Jim Zorn has been fired as the Redskins head coach. Early this morning, shortly after the team ended its 4-12 season with a loss to San Diego. Zorn lasted just 2 seasons and had a record of 12-20. He was the 6th head coach under owner Dan Snyder.
Thank you, Angie. One of the worst kept secrets in professional sports is now official. Mike Shanahan is the new head coach of the Washington Redskins. The 2-time Super Bowl winning coach is scheduled to be introduced to Redskins fans later this afternoon.
Snyder would bring in Mike Shanahan to replace Jim Zorn, also naming him the vice president of football operations, signing a 5-year, $35 million contract. However, Snyder wasn't done.
Open up the Washington Post this morning. They're talking about Donavan Mcnabb on the side of the Washington Redskins. He is now a Redskin.
The promise of the Redskins season would quickly come apart. However, going into week 9 of the season, the Redskins were 4-4 and were still in the playoff running and were headed to Philadelphia.
Just outside of Washington, D.C.
Mere hours before the game, McNabb signed a 5-year, $78 million extension, a decision Snyder would come to regret. A game that would come to be known as the Monday Night Massacre. The Redskins would lose 3 out of the next 4 games, and Shanahan would move McNabb to 3rd string. The Redskins would end the season 6-10.
Redskins owner Dan Snyder sues Washington City paper, and he has deep pockets.
Controversy continues to swirl over Redskins owner Daniel Snyder's lawsuit against the Washington City paper. Snyder says an article published about him has defamed his reputation.
In a lawsuit, the Redskins owner, Dan Snyder, claims the article smeared him, maligned him, defamed him, slandered him, and a picture that accompanied the article is anti-Semitic.
And that a picture portraying him as the devil is anti-Semitic, and criticizes him for everything from overcharging Redskins fans to alleged unethical business practices. Snyder and his legal team are suing for $2 million in total.
In February 2011, Snyder sued the Washington City paper for defamation because of an article titled "The Cranky Redskins Fan's Guide to Dan Snyder," which he claimed not only defamed him, but included an anti-Semitic depiction of him. Snyder had never read the article, and 7 months later, Snyder dropped the lawsuit. The team's poor performance on the field had a big impact, with nearly 10,000 seats being removed from FedEx Field due to lack of attendance. Snyder needed a new quarterback.
Settling into his new home in Minneapolis, the former Skins quarterback has checked into camp for the Vikings. He's going through his first practices with Minnesota, trying to put behind him an admittedly forgettable season last year with the Skins.
The Washington Redskins select Robert Griffin III, quarterback, Baylor.
The Redskins had traded up to draft the dual-threat Heisman winner, Robert Griffin III. RG3 would have his way with defenses, whether it was on the ground or through the air.
On the Redskins' first possession, he fires downfield. He's now
combined with rookie running back and 6th-round pick Alfred Morris, the Redskins flourished. However, a disturbing trend would begin to emerge.
looking, nobody there.
Robert Griffin III. The Redskins quarterback was knocked out of yesterday's game against the Atlanta Falcons. An examination at the stadium revealed that he had a mild concussion.
But also a huge scare for the Redskins. Quarterback Robert Griffin III left the game in the fourth quarter with a knee injury. Tried to come back for a little bit, left for good, had an MRI earlier tonight. It was determined that there's no significant ligament damage.
Had injured his knee and sustained a grade 1 LCL sprain. But to everyone's surprise, returned to the field. A decision that would draw intense criticism, leading to the Redskins' wildcard game.
He's not ready for this wildcard game between the Seahawks and the Redskins with not a lot of blades of grass, and so the footing will be important to check as we go forward, and obviously for a guy with a bad knee, that's a big deal.
Hours before the game, an article was published by USA Today stating that RG3 was never approved to re-enter the game after his injury during the Ravens game. Down by 7, RG3 hoped to lead his team down the field, but concerns about RG3's health would come to a head. RG3 would tear his ACL and LCL, ending his season, never playing the same way again.
The NFL cut $36 million from the Redskins' salary cap over 2 seasons for the way the team structured player contracts in 2010.
The NFL smacked the Redskins with one of the biggest penalties of this offseason. The NFL has stripped $36 million from the Redskins' salary cap space and another $10 million from the Cowboys. The penalties come because both teams broke rules relating to the salary cap and the structure of player contracts.
The Washington Redskins would be fined over $36 million over the next 2 seasons for overspending on contracts during the uncapped 2010 season. Head coach Mike Shanahan would say that the team would not have traded up had they known the penalty that was coming.
The Washington Redskins select Robert Griffin III, quarterback Baylor.
And Robert Griffin III is down on the ground and can't get up.
Redskins now looking for a new head coach.
Among those let go today, Mike Shanahan, fired by the Redskins after going 3-13.
Shanahan came to town to resuscitate the Redskins, but like so many before him, he couldn't complete the task. But then came the infamous injury and its aftermath. And then Shanahan's decision to sit RG3 the last 3 games of this season. The writing, it seemed, was on the wall.
Redskins fans, it's Monique, 4th-year veteran and captain of the Washington Redskins Cheerleaders, and I'm here in Costa Rica.
Hi, I'm Madison. And I'm Allison, and we are coming to you from Costa Rica.
In 2013, Redskins cheerleaders went on an off-season trip to Costa Rica to shoot photos for the upcoming calendar. A group of sponsors for the team were granted up-close access during the photo shoot, which made some of the women uncomfortable. What made matters worse is during the photo shoot, they decided to take some topless photos, even though the calendar would not contain any nudity. However, the sponsors' VIP access didn't end there.
Now some of the cheerleaders are making disturbing allegations about what they say was going on behind the scenes.
One night, the cheerleading squad director told 9 of the 36 women that they would be escorting their sponsors to the nightclub. Several of the women began to cry. They felt as if they were being pimped out to these wealthy men. Upon arriving, the women were encouraged to drink and flirt. And upon exiting, local police stopped the group of women, believing they were prostitutes. But this tale of exploitation and degradation would not come to light for another 5 years.
Says never in response to the push to change the name of the Washington Redskins. He takes a public stance, and in his words, he says he will never change the name of the team.
The Redskins will introduce the team's new coach in about 4 hours. And if you haven't heard it, he is Jay Gruden.
Jay Gruden gets a 5-year deal with the Redskins, which is unusual for a first-time head coach in the National Football League.
Kirk Cousins is the starting quarterback after he won the job over RG3.
The change was made early this morning by head coach Jay Gruden and the Redskins. This is now Kirk Cousins' team. He's the man picked to lead the Redskins for the 2015 season.
And it's the end of an era. The Redskins have released Robert Griffin III.
Well, we knew it was coming, but now it's official. This morning, the Burgundy and Gold released quarterback Robert Griffin III. The news ends a once celebrated but short and rocky career with Washington.
The treatment of NFL cheerleaders is once again under scrutiny.
Now to the scandal rocking the NFL. A number of former cheerleaders accusing officials for the Washington Redskins of treating them in demeaning ways during a photo shoot.
This Costa Rica photo shoot should have been paradise. They said they were required to pose topless. They were told to escort the team's financial backers to a nightclub.
I was an NFL cheerleader for 4 years, and I can tell you that these kinds of issues have been going on for a long time. Team calendar, First Ladies of Football.
The first shoots of the week are about to begin.
An article had been published by the New York Times detailing the Redskins cheerleaders' exploitative trip to Costa Rica in 2013. 5 former Redskin cheerleaders had come forward, claiming they were sexually harassed and intimidated by the team and sponsors. An internal investigation by the team would soon follow. The Redskins' sinister reputation was beginning to come to light.
The Kansas City Chiefs will trade quarterback Alex Smith to the Washington Redskins. The move allows Washington to split with quarterback Kirk Cousins, who is a pending free agent.
It's the latest in Washington Redskins' ongoing saga.
The team's quarterback is out for the rest of the season. Alex Smith broke 2 bones in his leg after a third-quarter sack in yesterday's loss against the Houston Texans.
Smith had emergency surgery last night. He is out for the season.
Going back to the drawing board, Washington deciding to part ways with head coach Jay Gruden, firing him after the team's 0-5 start to the season.
The NFL Network reports a deal is done with Ron Rivera and the Redskins. He is reportedly getting a 5-year contract as the team's newest head coach.
Ron Rivera.
I've got to say, if I were the owner of the team, and I knew that there was a name of my team that was offending a sizable group of people, I'd think about changing it.
Pressure continues to mount on the Washington Redskins to change their name, which many consider racist.
The owner of the team once said he would never do it, saying you can put that in caps.
Washington Redskins announcing the team is undergoing a thorough review of its name amid pushback from sponsors and corporate giants, including stadium sponsor FedEx.
It's about money. It's always been about money, and that's the reality of the situation. We could call Dan Snyder insensitive. We can call him a lot of different things because of his refusal to change the name.
That name, that logo, 87 years of tradition are wrapped up in them. So are decades of turmoil. Viewed by many as a racial slur,
calls for the Redskins' name to be changed was intensifying. In the wake of the George Floyd protests, the NFL's iconic franchise, in particular their name and logo, drew renewed criticism. But Snyder stood unmoved and unwilling even to consider the idea, until one day a letter arrived. FedEx, the Redskins stadium sponsor, had sent a letter stating unless the team changes its name, it will remove its signage from the stadium after the NFL's 2020 season, 6 years before the $205 million deal's expiration. Nike and Amazon had already pulled all Redskins-related gear from their stores. Snyder's hand was forced.
One of the most controversial team names in sports history is being removed.
Tonight, Washington's NFL team buckling under pressure, dropping the Redskins name and logo. Announcing the franchise's new name will inspire our sponsors, fans, and community for the next 100 years.
Just 3 days after the letter was sent, the Washington Redskins announced they would be changing their name temporarily to the Washington Football Team while they settle in on their official name. However, soon, Snyder's house of deceit would fall.
There is breaking news just coming in about Washington's NFL team. 15 former female employees are speaking to the Washington Post, detailing allegations of sexual harassment over a span of 13 years.
Washington's NFL team, they're fresh off announcing it'll drop its controversial name, and the Washington Post reporting more than a dozen female former employees claim they were sexually harassed and verbally abused while they worked there.
5 ex-employees, including some who were part of owner Dan Snyder's inner circle, are accused of inappropriate language and unwanted sexual advances.
Behavior was not only ignored, but at times tolerated. Executives, including owner Dan Snyder, turning a blind eye.
The Washington Post published a bombshell article. 15 former female Redskin employees came forward, accusing Redskin executives of sexual harassment and workplace discrimination. Alex Santos, Richard Mann, Dennis Green, and Mitch Gershman would be at the center of this story. Rhiannon Walker, a new beat reporter for the Washington Football Team, arrived at Prime 47 Steakhouse. She was concerned on hearing that the Redskins scouting director, Alex Santos, was asking from some of her colleagues whether they believed Walker was interested in him. Soon after arriving, Santos approached. As the conversation progressed, Santos eventually asked, "Would you date me if you were single?" Walker, in a committed relationship, and with the knowledge that Santos was a married man, adamantly said no, still attempting to flirt, and after minutes went by, Santos pinched her on the hip in full view of her colleagues. She was humiliated and soon filed a complaint with the team. However, this was not the first complaint filed against Santos. Reporter Nora Princiotti stated that on several occasions, as she walked, Santos would pull up alongside her, making comments about her body and clothing, stating that she had a great for a little white girl, and that she should wear less clothing. Santos' reputation was widespread among female employees for sending inappropriate text messages and telling women to turn around for him in the office. And word loomed of the article being published, and Santos was let go by the team. Scouting assistant Richard Mann was also fired by the team after a series of inappropriate text messages were released by a former female employee. In one such conversation, Mann asked an employee whether or not she had her breasts surgically enhanced. In another, he asked whether he could squeeze her butt if he brought her some food. And Mann telling an employee that he would give her an inappropriate hug on her last day.
Oh, quarterback draw, Sonny's calling for it.
The toxic culture extended even to Redskin legend Larry Michael, the voice of the Redskins, making constant derogatory and sexual remarks about female co-workers. In one such incident, Michael was caught on a hot mic, making comments about an intern for the Redskins. A complaint was submitted, and the team's legal attorney took the hard drive. When it was returned, there was no trace of the recording. Soon after hearing of the article that was going to be published, he announced his retirement. The work environment at the Redskins organization was toxic, to say the least. From incidents of men trying to look under women's skirts from down a stairwell, to women being berated constantly, and women being encouraged to wear tight and revealing clothing and flirt with sweet holders. The Redskins announced, alongside firing 3 of the men mentioned in the article, that they would be hiring an attorney, Beth Wilkinson, to review the team's workplace misconduct. Strangely, the report had no direct mention of Snyder. However, that would soon change.
Here's what's happening at this hour, everybody. Lawyers for more than a dozen former employees of the Washington football team are calling on the NFL to launch its own investigation into sexual harassment charges against that team. They are also asking for team owner Dan Snyder to be removed if those charges are substantiated. "25 more women had come forward. But this time, Snyder had been directly accused. The article states, in his 21 years of ownership, Snyder has presided over an organization in which women say they have been marginalized, discriminated against, and exploited. The employees also describe an atmosphere in which bullying and demeaning behavior by management created a climate of fear that allowed abusive behavior to continue unchecked. Lack of HR, women harassed and objectified. It was like fresh meat to a pack of wolves every time a new pack of interns would come in. And a tyrannical owner at its head, led by fear." On August 31st, Roger Goodell announces that the NFL would be taking over the investigation into the allegations levied against the Washington football team.
You're aware that in 2009, Dan Snyder was accused of sexually assaulting an employee on a private airplane, correct?
Am I aware of that? Yes.
On December 22nd, it was revealed that the Washington football team paid out $1.6 million as part of a settlement to a former female Redskin employee who accused Daniel Snyder of sexual misconduct while returning from an event on his private plane. On December 28th, Snyder was sued by 3 limited partners for corporate malfeasance, including harassment and intimidation, and various financial crimes. Partner John Moog claimed Snyder sent 2 intruders to his home to interrogate and harass him Snyder had accused the three partners of planting stories of alleged sexual misconduct about him. Moog sent a threatening text in response, which stated, "If you continue your game, you know what I know about and what I have never spoken about, and you know it has nothing to do with the media. It's the more serious." On February 10th, 2021, a settlement was reached with the cheerleaders involved in the 2008 calendar video photo shoot, where inappropriate tapes were created. On March 3rd, the Washington football team announced that the cheerleading program would end, replaced by a co-ed dance squad. On March 24th, Snyder bought out the three minority partners, a 40.5% stake for $875 million.
We have some breaking news out of Washington now. The NFL is fining the Washington football team $10 million.
NFL has fined the Washington football team $10 million
for fostering a hostile work environment for female employees
after a sexual misconduct investigation.
It comes after an independent review found the workplace environment at the club, especially for women, was highly unprofessional.
CEO Dan Snyder will step back for a time, allowing his wife Tanya to assume all responsibilities for all day-to-day team operations.
The NFL's investigation had ended. They found that the Washington football team had operated with a toxic work culture for years. But no specifics are given by the league. Only a 2-page press release. No suspension is issued. Only that Snyder turns over day-to-day operations to his wife, Tanya Snyder.
Jon Gruden is in hot water after an old email surfaced today that has some accusing him of using racist language.
Raiders head coach Jon Gruden apologizing for using racist language in an email that he wrote 10 years ago.
Raiders head coach Jon Gruden is in damage control mode tonight because of a racist email he sent in 2011 that has just come to light.
Can the NFL and the Raiders and the fans be sure that there are not any other racial insensitive remarks by you out there in the atmosphere?
On October 8th, a series of emails between GM Bruce Allen and Raiders head coach Jon Gruden were released, containing racist comments by Gruden. On October 11th, more emails were released, containing more racist, misogynistic, and homophobic slurs used by Gruden. Gruden would resign just 4 years into his 10-year, $100 million deal. A year later, it would be revealed that Snyder had leaked these emails to show GM Bruce Allen's relationship with the media. At the time, Gruden was a commentator with ESPN. On October 21st, Congress gets involved. The House Oversight and Reform Committee announced an investigation into the Washington football team and the NFL's investigation into the team's misconduct. According to the Washington Post, it was revealed that Snyder had used multiple methods to interfere with the NFL's investigation. Snyder used private detectives to intimidate and keep tabs on current and former employees he suspected of talking to the press.
It's about a private matter.
No, I don't know.
Thank you. Alrighty, thanks.
He filed lawsuits against former employees to find out who was speaking to the press, and reportedly used the legal system to compel suspected sources to turn over their phone and email history so he could positively identify them. Snyder had attempted to bribe the employee who sued him for sexual misconduct in 2009 and attempted to sue the lead investigator, Beth Wilkinson, in an attempt to bar her from talking directly to the accuser. Goodell claims that these attempts at disturbing or derailing the investigation had no effect. On January 2nd, 2022, a railing collapses, sending several fans hurling towards Hertz, nearly hitting him. The fans deny that they were offered on-site medical evaluations. Months later, the fans sued the Washington football team over their injuries. February 2nd, 2022. The team announced their new name,
We are
the Washington
the Commanders.
Commanders, which received mixed reactions.
Explosive allegations waged against Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder and the NFL on Capitol Hill.
Team owner Dan Snyder called out directly brand new allegations of sexual assault and harassment against Snyder.
Now, where lawmakers heard disturbing new details from former Washington Commanders employees.
That placing me strategically by the owner at a work dinner after this networking event was not for me to discuss business, but to allow him, Dan Snyder, to place his hand on my thigh under the table.
Just about how many times she endured sexual harassment within the organization.
Too many to count. I was there 14 years, and it's too many to count.
Is it more than 100?
It's more than 100.
More than 200?
If I had to guess, yes.
And the entire organization. And that rot started at the top.
A series of new allegations were made against Snyder and the Washington organization. One woman claimed she saw a friend get groped in front of team owner Dan Snyder, who reportedly laughed after seeing a team executive grope the woman. A former cheerleader accused Snyder of sitting next to her at a dinner and grabbing her leg. After the dinner, Snyder attempted her to get into the limo and stopped when his attorney told Snyder it was a very, very bad idea. And during an employee awards trip, as they returned to Snyder's home, the men had invited prostitutes back. The NFL opens a second investigation into the team. February 4th. Congress releases information that the Commanders and the NFL had a common interest agreement in which Snyder had the power to veto the release of the NFL's investigation into workplace misconduct. To make matters worse, accusations of financial impropriety arose. The House Oversight Committee reviewed more than 80,000 pages of documents and interviewed witnesses, and found that Snyder had been using 2 different books, indicating deceptive accounting practices. And on April 12th, the House Committee sends a 20-page letter to the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, alleging that Snyder and the Commanders may have engaged in a troubling, long-running, and potentially unlawful pattern of financial conduct, accusing the franchise of stealing season ticket deposits worth roughly $5 million, and accused of hiding ticket revenue from the NFL.
Once again, the Washington Commanders under a microscope. Wednesday, to both the Commanders' owner, Dan Snyder, and the NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell, asking them to come testify at a hearing later this month.
Today, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell will testify in front of the House Oversight Committee about the league's handling of allegations against the Washington Commanders football team. Commanders owner Dan Snyder was invited to testify. He is not expected to be there.
While Goodell agreed to appear in front of the committee, Snyder declined, and the committee issued a subpoena to compel his testimony. But he could not be served as he was out of the country in his yacht near France and was accused of evading service of the subpoena. Eventually, Snyder agreed to testify. The testimony lasted for over 10.5 hours. He avoided answering questions, claiming he couldn't recall the answer to over 100 questions.
Well, they made it very clear, Zoe, that Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, in favor of removing Commanders owner Dan Snyder.
In general, of him being removed and selling the franchise.
Jim Irsay became the first owner to publicly speak out against Dan Snyder. On November 2nd, Dan Snyder hired Bank of America to explore the option of possibly selling the team. On November 10th, the Washington Attorney General sued the Commanders, Snyder, the NFL, and Roger Goodell for their roles in allegedly covering up the workplace and sexual misconduct allegations against the organization. On November 27th, a Sean Taylor memorial statue was unveiled, marking the 15th year since his death. The statue was a major disappointment. On December 8th, the House Committee for Oversight and Reform released its report. They found that owner Dan Snyder contributed to the team's toxic workplace and attempted to impede the investigation, and they criticized the NFL and Goodell for not taking action against Snyder and the Commanders organization. The Commanders' on-field play became a backdrop in the scandalous world of Dan Snyder.
A secret $55 million loan has become a primary focus of federal investigators examining financial misconduct by Dan Snyder and his Washington Commanders football team.
Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder, a brand new report accuses him of financial fraud.
Now there's potential bank fraud allegations coming at Dan Snyder for taking a $55 million loan out.
But this all circles on that $55 million loan that seems to have been co-signed by the NFL without the knowledge of the minority owners for the Commanders.
A mysterious $55 million loan. A loan that was now the focal point of federal prosecutors investigating allegations of financial misconduct by Snyder and the Washington Commanders. Snyder's minority partners had not approved or had even known about the loan's existence until 16 months later. They found a small footnote in an April 2020 financial report. The three minority partners decided to delve deeper into the team's finances and were shocked by what they found. They alleged that Snyder had used team funds to help pay for his 2 personal yachts, multiple residences, the services of more than 60 members of his personal staff, multiple vehicles in the US and Europe, and countless meals, wine, beverages, and entertainment. Snyder had paid himself a salary of $10 million a year. He also had arranged for the franchise to pay him a total of $4.5 million for having the team logo emblazoned on his personal jet, an advertising fee. The minority partners demanded that Goodell investigate the origin of the $55 million loan. No investigation occurred, and the arbitration was promptly shut down, and the partners agreed to mediation. The issue ended with the minority shareholders selling their shares for $875 million.
Breaking news here on NFL Live, we bring Adam Schefter in for the latest on the Washington Commanders sale.
This morning, Washington Commanders fans waking up to a potential new ownership.
All right, Laura, moments ago I was told that there is a preliminary agreement between the group led by Josh Arish and Daniel Snyder to sell the Commanders for what would be a record $6.05 billion.
Under Snyder's stewardship, the team's image has imploded.
That move would close the book on the Snyder era in D.C. that was marred by multiple controversies.
Snyder reached a preliminary agreement to sell the Commanders to billionaire Josh Harris Fortune 500 founder Mitchell Rales, and NBA Hall of Famer Magic Johnson for an NFL record $6.05 billion. And on July 20th, the team owners unanimously approved the $6 billion sale of the Washington Commanders. Snyder's reign of terror was over.
The tenure of one of the most vilified owners in all of professional sports. The league also released the findings of their investigation into Snyder's business practices, which resulted in a $60 million fine. Snyder will pay the league on his way out.
Daniel Snyder will pay $60 million in restitution after a league investigation found that he sexually harassed a female employee and improperly withheld revenue when he owned the Washington Commanders. The accusations levied against Snyder by former Commanders cheerleader Tiffany Johnson had been substantiated and corroborated by eyewitnesses. Mary Jo White, former federal prosecutor and chairwoman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, substantiated the claims, stating the team intentionally shielded and withheld revenues totaling over $11 million. A 24-year reign.
Team in the nation. What I did realize was that I've always been a Redskin fan, and this is my dream.
Team's
Defined by
on-field
failure.
performance has declined.
Controversy.
Sensitive. We can call him a lot of different things because of his refusal to change the name.
And scandal.
He's got to be the worst owner in professional sports history.